Begin the Gemara today on Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph, right at the beginning of the Amud, where it says Ula Rabbi Akiva. So this Gemara is a continuation from a Braisa quoted before, which explains the Psukim that it says both regarding a Nazir and regarding a Kohen Gadol that he's not allowed to become Tomei. So in order to understand the Gemara here, we have to go over the drashas according to Rabbi Akiva that the Gemara dashes from the Psukim. So first, the pasuk that it says by a Nazir, Va'al kol nafshes meis lo yavai, la'aviv uli'imai lo yitama. So according to Rabbi Akiva, the words la'aviv uli'imai are extra in the pasuk, because when it says Va'al kol nafshes meis lo yavai, from there we know that a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to become tamei to anybody, including his relatives. The Gemara will soon quote this drasha according to Rabbi Akiva that the expression al kol nafshes meis includes even to become tamei to relatives. If so, why does it tell have to write la'aviv uli'imai, father and mother? We know that he's not allowed to become tamei to a relative. So the Gemara before said that according to Rabbi Akiva, or really according to everybody, the drasha of la'aviv and li'imai is teaching me la'aviv, but if he's not allowed to become tamei. But if it's a case of a meis mitzvah, he's allowed. That's the word la'aviv. Uli'imai is coming to teach me a gzeira shava. We learn out from Nazir, just like by Nazir, only to a mace he's not allowed to become tamei, but to a mitzayra, to a zav, he is allowed. So we learn out li'imai that it says by Nazir, to the li'imai that it says by Kohen Gadol, that he's allowed to become tamei to a mitzayra and a zav. That's what the word li'imai is coming to teach me. Okay, so that's the drasha of Rabbi Akiva regarding this pasuk that it says by Kohen Gadol. Now, there are the psukim that it says regarding a Nazir, and here the Torah actually says it with more arichis, there's more length there. The pasuk says, Kol yemei hazirei lashem al nefesh meis lo yavai. Then the next pasuk spells out, la'aviv, uli'imai, la'achiv, la'achaisai, lo yitam lahem. So let's go through some of the drashas here, in these psukim, according to Rabbi Akiva, what's relevant for the continuation of the Gemara. So first of all, according to Rabbi Akiva, if the pasuk says here al nefesh meis lo yavai, so I already know that means that the nazir is not allowed to become tamei, not to any mace and not to a relative. Again, because it says al nefesh meis, doesn't just say mace, it says nefesh and mace, so that includes all types of mason, including relatives. So now everything it says in the next pasuk, aviv, imai, achiv, achaisa, is all extra. These are all examples of relatives. So what do we learn out from la'aviv uli'imai? So before Rabbi Akiva said in the Gemara that from there we learn out la'aviv uli'imai, he's not allowed to become tamei, but not if it's a meis mitzvah. From la'achiv we learn out that if it's a nazir and this nazir is also a Kohen Gadol, so now you have two isurim that he's not allowed to become tamei because he's a nazir and a Kohen Gadol. So he's not allowed to become tamei to his brother. But if it's a meis mitzvah, he is allowed. That's the drasha from La'achiv. Okay, so now based on this, the Gemara will ask that according to Rabbi Akiva, it comes out that La'aviv and Li'imai, that it says both by Kohen Gadol and by Nazir, it's not necessary to have both of them, the La'aviv and the Li'imai, and this is a question both on the La'aviv and the Li'imai that it says by Nazir and it says by Kohen Gadol. As the Gemara will explain here, and I'll spell it out according to what the Rishonim explain here. First, let's see the words of the Gemara inside. Frek the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva's opinion, Mechti. Let's see. Lo yishna Kohen Gadol l'chadei, v'lo yishna Kohen Gadol v'hu nazir. According to Rabbi Akiva, there's no difference if it's a case of just a Kohen Gadol, that we learned out from the pasuk that he's allowed to be metameh himself to a meis mitzvah. And it also makes no difference if it's a Kohen Gadol and he's a Nazir. Nafkim la'achiv, I learn out from la'achiv that even he, with these two isurim, is also allowed to become tamei to a meis mitzvah. If so, the question now is la'aviv u'li'imai la'mali. These two expressions of both la'aviv and li'imai, why are they both necessary? Okay, so let's explain this here. First, let's explain the Gemara's question regarding the la'aviv u'li'imai that it says by a Kohen Gadol. Why? The Gemara is asking, according to Rabbi Akiva, why does the Torah have to say both la'aviv u'li'imai? What's the Gemara's question? So first of all, the Rosh points out that the Gemara's question is not on the u'li'imai that it says by Nazir, because as mentioned before, li'imai is needed for gzeira shava. to learn out from Nazir that only to a mace he's not allowed to become Tameh, but to a Mitzayir and Zav he is allowed. So that's not the question. But the Gemara's question is on La'aviv. What did we say before that we're learning out from La'aviv that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to become Tameh to a mace mitzvah? But if in the parsha of a Nazir, the Torah writes the extra word La'achiv to teach me that even if he's a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol, he's allowed to become Tameh to a mace mitzvah, so for sure, just being a Kohen Gadol, he's allowed to become Tameh to a mace mitzvah. So in the parsha of the Kohen Gadol, it's not necessary to write La'aviv to teach me that he can become Tameh to a mace mitzvah. So the question is regarding the psukim that it says by Kohen Gadol. Yes, it has to say Le'imai for the Gzeir Shava, but it doesn't have to say La'aviv. I already know from what it says by Nazir that he can become Tameh to a mace mitzvah. That's the question over there. Now, the question of the Gemara is also regarding the La'aviv U'Le'imai that it says in the parsha of Nazir. So before, Rabbi Kiva said that I learn out from both together, from La'aviv and Le'imai, that a Kohen Gadol could become Tameh to a mace mitzvah. But the question is, why do we have to learn out this that he can become Tameh to a mace mitzvah from both together, from La'aviv and Le'imai? Why can't I learn it out from one of them? Just let the Torah just write La'aviv, and I'll know that he can become Tameh to a mace mitzvah. La'aviv is extra. Again, going back to the point I mentioned before, both by Nazir and by Kohen Gadol, La'aviv and Le'imai are extra. Why? Because we already learn out from a Kol Nafshes Meis or a Kol Nefesh Meis that it says both by Nazir and Kohen Gadol that he's not allowed to become Tameh to anybody, including relatives. So La'aviv and Le'imai are extra. So now again, back to the La'aviv and Le'imai that it says by Nazir, why is it necessary to learn out the halacha that he can't become Tameh to a father and mother, but he could to a mace mitzvah? So you have to have both La'aviv and Le'imai. Why both? Why not La'aviv alone? That's the Gemara's question here. And the Gemara, regarding this detail of the question that it's asking on the pasuk by Nazir, gives the introduction over here that this is a question on Rabbi Kiva. Since Rabbi Kiva says I have the pasuk of La'achiv, and from there I learn out that it's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir that he could become Tameh to a mace mitzvah. So now we have the question, why by Nazir does it have to say two limudim for mace mitzvah, Le'imai, La'aviv and Le'imai? What the Gemara is trying to say is, if I wouldn't have the La'achiv, then I could answer simply, La'aviv is coming to say that a Nazir could become Tameh to a mace mitzvah, and then Le'imai is coming to say Nazir and also a Kohen Gadol. If it's both together, he could become Tameh to a mace mitzvah. But since that we learn out already from La'achiv, so the question remains, why does it have to say separately Le'imai that he could become Tameh to a mace mitzvah? So again, in short, the Gemara's question over here is both regarding a Nazir, when it says by a Nazir La'aviv Le'imai, and regarding a Kohen Gadol when it says La'aviv Le'imai. Regarding a Kohen Gadol, the question of the Gemara is, yes, it has to say Le'imai for Gzeir Shava, but it doesn't have to say La'aviv, because we already know from the parsha of a Nazir that a Kohen Gadol cannot become Tameh to a father, but he could to a mace mitzvah. And on the other hand, when it comes to the parsha of Nazir, it doesn't have to say La'aviv and Le'imai, because I can learn out just from one of them that the Nazir that is becomes Tameh to a mace mitzvah. Okay, so the Gemara will answer both of these regarding the Nazir and the Kohen Gadol, why it has to say separately La'aviv and Le'imai. Talk to Gemara. Tzrichi. It's necessary to write both La'aviv and Le'imai. Kasav Aviv. If the Torah would only write that he's not allowed to become Tameh to the father, Hava Mineh, then I would say Haine Taimeh Deloy Metamale. The reason why a Kohen Gadol or similar a Nazir cannot become Tameh to a father, Mishum de Chazakeh Ba'almahu, because the fact that this is his father is based on a Chazakeh. It's based on a certain presumption that this is his father. We don't know 100% on a fact that we see that this is his father. What is it based on? So the Gemara says in another place, Roiv bi'ilais acharabal. When a woman gives birth, there's a chazaka or there's a roiv that the baby born comes from the relation with the father. So it's not something that we see as a fact. So that therefore I would say, because it's only based on this roiv or on this chazaka, so here the Torah says that he's not allowed to become Tameh to the father. But when it comes to a mother, and we know for a fact that this is the mother, she gave birth to this child, maybe here the Torah allows the Nazir or the Kohen Gadol to become Tameh to her. Some of Farshim say what the Gemara really means to say is it's not really, the Svara here is not just the fact that regarding the father, there's sort of some kind of a doubt whether this is a father. And therefore the Torah asks us to become tamei. As far as the mother is concerned, there's no doubt whatsoever. The Gemara is just using this to illustrate to you how there's a svara to say that the relationship, the closeness, the mother being a relative is much closer than a father. Because a mother, we see and we know that the child is born from the mother. The father, the very fact that it's based on a roiv, so therefore in life, in reality, in the kurva, and as far as how close of a relative it is, he's not as much as the father is not as close to the child as a mother. So therefore I would say that the father, when the Torah writes the father, only the father he cannot become tamei too, because of this level of kurva is not as strong as a mother. In the reverse, because of Rachmana Imai, if the Torah would only write that a Kohen Gadol or a Nazir is not allowed to become tamei to the mother, there's the opposite svara. Hava Mina, I would say, Imai Leila Tamala, to the mother should not become tamei, Dili Azal Zara Basra, because the descendants, the children, don't follow in their yichos after her, as far as the family is concerned, which shevet they belong to, or as far as the Yerush is concerned, inheritance, it doesn't go after the mother. Aval Aviv, but when it comes to a father, Kivin Damama, since the master has said, we learn out from the pasuk that it says, Lemishpachaisam, Lebeisavaisam. What's the mishpacha, the family, the yichus, the inheritance, goes after the father. So therefore, there's a svara to say that the relationship of a child to a father is actually closer. So then I would say that the Kohen Gadol or the Nazir could become tamei to a father. So therefore, Kamash Malan, therefore the Torah has to write both the father and the mother. La'aviv u'le'imai. So, the way Taisvis explains over here, what the Gemara is trying to say is that we understood, even in the question, why, regarding a Kohen Gadol, it was necessary for the Torah to write le'imai. For Gzeira Shava, as mentioned before. We also understood why, regarding a Nazir, it's necessary for the Torah to write la'aviv, in order to learn out that one meis mitzvah could be metama. Our question was, why does the Torah have to write both by the Nazir and by the Kohen Gadol, la'aviv and le'imai? So the point that the Gemara is answering is, if the Torah would write only le'imai by the Kohen Gadol or only la'aviv by the Nazir, then I would come and say that true, it only has to write one for the particular drasha needed, but now that it only wrote la'aviv, it would cause me to make a mistake and think, maybe only to the father he's not allowed to become tamei because there's a special closer relationship to the father, or maybe only to the mother he's not allowed to become tamei because of the special relationship to the mother. So once you have to write one of them, la'aviv or le'imai, you're forced to write the other one also in order to clarify that the isser of the Kohen Gadol or the Nazir to become tamei is both to the father and the mother. Okay, that's the pshat in the Gemara over here. Dr. Gemara weiter, this is continuing now according to Rabbi Akiva. The Bachim puts here into the Gemara, or Rabbi Akiva. So it says in the pasuk by the Kohen Gadol, Val kol nafshes meis lo yovai. Lamali, what do I learn out from this pasuk? The Gemara is asking this according to Rabbi Akiva by the pasuk that it says by Nazir, a similar pasuk. There it says al nefesh meis lo yovai. So from there, Rabbi Akiva learned out nefesh meis, that it means whether the chaykim, whether a mace that's not a relative, or krevim, a mace that is a relative. So over here, now the Gemara says regarding Kohen Gadol, it also says a similar pasuk, I'll call nafshis mace, and it actually adds even more. It says call and it says nafshis mace. So what are we learning out from this? And for the Gemara, I'll call, when it says I'll call, or Tosfos actually says the Gemara's kavana here is from I'll call nafshis la'afuke chaykim. It's coming to say that he's not allowed to become tamei to a mace that's not a relative. Then when it writes mace, what's the addition of the word mace after it says I'll call nafshos la'afuke krevim, that he's not allowed to become tamei to relatives. Now when it says nafshos, and the main diak of the Gemara here is the fact that it uses a plural term, it doesn't say nefesh. Why does it say nafshos? La'afuke revius dam sheyotza mishnei mesim, if there is a revius of blood that comes out, but this revius is a combination of two different mesim. The revius of dam is the minimum amount necessary to be in a human body to live. So that's the chayas of a person, and that's the minimum amount that it can become tamei in the tumah of oil. Shemetama ba'oil, that's metama in oil. So over here, if you have a revius of dam, but it comes from two mesim together, that shenemer al kol nafshis meis lo yovai. So we learn out that it is metame ba'oil, even though it's from two mesim together, because it uses the plural term of akol nafshes meis lo yovei, and lo yovei refers to the tuma of oil. That's what we learn out from this plural lashon of nafshes. Zaktelige Mishneh al elu tumais hanazir megaleach. On the following tumais, a nazir will have to be megaleach, meaning he has to cut his hair and then bring karbonis, be metayed himself, and start his naziris over again, as the Mishnah will conclude here. But here are the kinds of tumah that will cause him this level of tumas meis that this halacha of megaleach and the karbonis will apply. Al meis, he touches a meis, or it becomes tummy to a mace, valak al kazayis man a mace, even if it's only one kazayis of the mace, val kazayis notzel, or if it's a kazayis of a liquidy substance from a mace, vamulay tarva drekev, or if it's a dusty, powdery substance from a mace which has no moisture to it whatsoever, but it's one spoonful of a mace. Val gulgailes, the skull of a mace, val evim in a mace, one limb of a dead body, or val evim in a chai, or one limb from a live body, that was amputated, sheyesh olav basar karoi, that has on it enough flesh that it could live, if it would be connected to the body, it would live. Val chatzi kav atzamais, or on the amount of a half a kav, certain measurement of bones of a mace. Val chatzi lug dam, or a half a lug of blood. Now this is different than what we said before. Before we mentioned that the tumah of oil regarding a mace is a revi'is dam, but here regarding a nazir, that halacha that he has to bring karbonis for the tumah should apply. It has to be more, it has to be double, it has to be a half a lug. All these shiurim, all these different details it says there are halacha l'Moshe misinai. So on all these different parts of the mace that he becomes tamei to, so al magon, whether he touched any of this, al masan, or carry them even without touching, or va'al ahilon, or if there was a tent or a roof over him and any of these parts of the mace, so he'll become tamei, and he has to bring karbonis and start his naziris over again. Now val etzem kisa'ira, if he touches a bone of a mace that's the size of a barley, then al magoyev al masai. There only at the touch or the carrying will he have to start his naziris over again, but there's no tumas oil when it comes to etzem kisa'ira, to this small amount. Now what happens here with the nazir when he becomes tamei? Al elu an nazir megaleach. So on the following, the tumas as mentioned, so the nazir will have to cut his hair. Umazeh b'shlishi b'shvi. So what he does is, first he has to become tar. So he sprayed the blood of the para aduma on him on the third day of his tumah, then on the seventh day, v'seiser es hakaidmin. And he now has to nullify all his previous days of naziris that he kept. Ve'ein maschel limnais, and he can't start counting naziris again. El achiyitar umevi is karbanaisav, until he'll become tired again, and he brings his karbanis on the 8th day, and then he starts counting his naziris again. Zakta Gemara Tana Rabbanon, we learned in Abraisa. After Rab Meir passed away, Amalan Rab Yehuda Talmidov. Rab Yehuda says to his students, Al Yekonzu Talmidei Rab Meir Lekan. The students of Rab Meir, they're looking for a new teacher to come and learn Torah from him. Don't allow the students of Rab Meir to enter here. Why? They're very argumentative. They're not coming to learn Torah. They're coming to cause me pain, asking me questions and challenging me in details of halachas. So therefore, do not let them in. Sumches, one of the main Talmidim of Rab Meir, pushed his way in to the yeshiva of Rab Yehuda. Amalahem, Sumches said to them, Kach shana li Rab Meir. This is how my teacher Rab Meir taught me the Mishnah that we just learned there, like it says in our Mishnah. Al elu tumis al nazir megaleach. Regarding the following tumis, a nazir will have to be megaleach, bring the karbanis, and start his naziris over again. And he learned, like it says in our Mishnah, al ameis, ve'al kazayis pan ameis, whether he became tummy to a mace, or if it's only a kazayis of a mace. That's how we taught the Mishnah. So now Rabbi Yehuda heard this. Cause Rabbi Yehuda got angry. And he said to his students, Loi kacha marti lechem. Isn't this what I told you? Al yikonsu talmidei Rab Meir lekan. Don't allow Rab Meir's students to come in here. Because they're argumentative. Al kazayis man ameis megaleyach. How does he learn this in the Mishnah? How could you be that you guide us in the Mishnah this way? If the Mishnah is telling you that a Nazir that becomes Tommy from a kazayis of a mace, so megaleyach, he has to bring his karbanis ala mace like kol shekain. If he becomes Tommy to a whole mace, to a body, a full body of a mace, for sure, he would have to be megaleyach. So how could he be guided in the Mishnah both kazayis man mace and mace? In other words, Rabbi Yehuda was taka only guided in the Mishnah al kazayis man mace, but he wasn't guided mace. So this is the question that he asked over here on the Girsa, the way Rabbi Meir taught it. So what happened? We're going to learn the continuation of the Gemara until the conclusion of this subject. Amar Rabbi Yosi. So Rabbi Yosi that was present said, Yaimru, people are going to say, Meir Shachav, Rabbi Meir passed away, Yehuda Kaas, and Rabbi Yehuda got angry, and Yosi Shasak, and Rabbi Yosi was quiet, he didn't react, he didn't answer anything to the question that was asked. Taira Matayala. What's going to be to the Taira that Rabbi Meir taught in his lifetime, this Girsa of the Mishnah? It's going to be, people are going to think that Girsa is wrong. So therefore Rabbi Yosi felt he has to speak up. So Rabbi Yosi answered and explained as follows. Amar Rabbi Yosi, le'nitzracha el lemeis she'ein olav kazayis basar. When it says mace, it's talking about the full body of a mace, but there isn't even a kazayis of flesh on this body of the mace. So yes, it already said kazayis min mace, but it's possible for there to be a body of a nafel, which the Gemara will soon mention, a miscarriage, where it's a very small body, a full body of a mace, but yet there's no kazayis basar, but it's a full body, and therefore, if you touch or the whatever the way of tumah, you become tummy to this body of the mace. That's why it has to say mace in addition to kazayis min mace. But the Gemara challenges this further and says, but va'dayin yoimar. But it still would be enough if for the Mishnah to say, al ever mimenu megaleyach, that the Mishnah already said that if only from one limb of a body of a mace, you're going to have to cut your hair and bring the karbanis. Al kulei lakol shekain. For sure, if it's a full body of a mace, you would have to cut your hair and bring karbanis. So there's still a question. If you still have a kavachayim, you could understand from the aver that it said. Why does it have to say in the Mishnah the case of a full mace? So Ella, the Gemara gives a different answer. The answer is like Rabbi Yechanan said elsewhere regarding a similar question. We're talking about a nafel, miscarriage, a baby very small. The body of the mace is very small. Not only does it not have a kazayis basar, as mentioned before, but also the evadim, the limbs of the body of this nafel, are not properly attached together. The sinews are not properly developed, and the evadim are not properly attached together. So that's what Rabbi Yechanan said elsewhere to explain this kind of repetition that there is in another Mishnah. So Hachanami, here in this Mishnah that we just learned as well, b'nefel shaloin is kashrei evav begidin. The reason why it has to say a mace, even though it already said kazayis basar, and it already said the Avrim in a mace, it's to tell you that even in a situation of a nafel where there is no kazayis basar, and there's also no proper avadim originally that are even attached together, nevertheless, you will become tamei to this nafel. Rava gave a different answer, what it's coming to say when it says mace. What it's teaching is, if you have most of the structure, or most of the numbers of the bones of the mace, and she'ein be'em roivat samis, even if it doesn't have the amount of bones that make up the shear, the amount of roivat samis, in other words, again, a nafel, a very small body, nevertheless, this will be metame. Right? So that's what the Mishnah has to add over here, this halacha of mace, to teach me this halacha regarding roiv binyanai and roiv minyanai. Okay, so that's another pshat here in the Mishnah. Okay.